I'm going to jump back just a little bit and tell you once again about the merry monarch. This is Charles II. So once again, we went James the First, and then Charles the First. Charles is the one who gets his head chopped off. Charles II is the one who comes back. This is a restoration. It's called the Restoration. It starts in 1660. A couple of years after Oliver Cromwell has died, and his son has been in, quote-unquote, power, but not really, because he's just not a capable ruler like his father is. I think the reason that they put the son of Oliver Cromwell in is because it seemed like a monarchy. That's just what you do with a monarchy. But it didn't work out so well. So people got tired of having to live like they were saved. Most people in England are not Calvinists, right? There are some Calvinists. In fact, Oliver Cromwell's one. What do we call them in England? English Calvinists? Puritans, yeah. So people get tired of rule by Puritans and rule by the military, and so they decide, really it's the army that decides to invite the legitimate ruler, this son of Charles I, Charles II, to come back to England and rule over England and Scotland as well. A parliament is restored. You might remember that Oliver Cromwell got rid of the parliament because he was fighting with them over money. Number two. And so they restore a parliament. It doesn't have any Puritans in it. It is people who are really actually quite supportive of the king, Charles II, and Anglicanism with bishops and the whole nine yards. So they restore the Anglican Church, they restore bishops, they restore fun to England. My anecdote for that was that Charles had some ungodly number of children, 12, 15 kids, and not a single one with his wife. So good times, but not maybe the proper way of doing things. What else did I want to tell you? I also wanted to tell you this. He looks for the people from the Rump Parliament who signed his father's death warrant. And those who are still alive are arrested and executed in a rather grisly way. So there is a little bit of payback for his father being killed. Well, the deal that Charles makes with Parliament is that he will, there you go. That's what real good monarchs look like at this point in time. They kind of get a little overblown with the dress and the crown and the scepters and the orb that they hold in their hands. He doesn't look like he's very merry, though, does he? Look at his face. You know how people don't smile back then in their portraits? And you know how you do smile when you're taking a selfie or when you're taking a picture? In fact, it's weird if you don't. There's a reason why you smile and why they don't. Why do you smile? When you're taking a picture? Why do we all smile when we're taking pictures? What do we want to show people? We're happy! Does he want to show people he's happy? What does he want to show people? He's powerful, so you got to have a serious expression on your face. Next time, I actually tried this once. You know, the people from Life Touch come, and it's very annoying when you have to have your picture taken, and they're telling you, and now move your chin 2 centimeters to the left, and you're like, and now move your eyebrow. What? Not your eye, just your eyebrow. What are you doing? So one time, and then they tell you always smile, and one time I was like, I'm not smiling, and the guy's like, are you sure? I said, I don't want to look happy, I want to look powerful. It didn't go over well. He took the picture and he's like, you look really grim. So don't go looking for that yearbook. Well, the Kings versus Parliament thing isn't supposed to happen with the Restoration. Here was the deal. The deal was that the army would invite Charles II back. He's the legitimate king. And then they would reestablish the Parliament, and then things would be nice and friendly. The king would listen to Parliament, the king would ask Parliament for money, and the Parliament would give money to the king. It was supposed to be nice. They're supposed to share power and share revenue. Well, that didn't really work too much. The king called Parliament, that's what they wanted, and allowed them to do their thing. But whenever he wanted money, they said no. You know how nobody really likes to pay taxes? well, it happens forever. And so Parliament was unwilling to give the king the money that he needed. And so he was really kind of angry about that. But another thing that happens, and this is going to blow your mind a little bit. You have to kind of wrap your mind around this. Charles II pressed for more religious toleration. Is your mind slightly blown? Okay. Why is your mind not slightly blown, Danielle?
Because what happened before.
Oh, yeah. I guess that makes sense. So, what happened before is his father got in trouble for pushing for that, and now he's pushing for the opposite. I like what you said. Well, there's sort of an additional bit to the story. He's pressing for toleration for Puritans. He's pressing for toleration for Catholics because he spent a lot of time on the continent, and he's basically a secret Catholic. He's a closet Catholic, if there is such a thing. And so he's pressing for toleration. Everybody knows that he's really wanting Catholics to have more rule or more power or more social standing in England because of this. The Anglican Parliament is very Anglican. They don't want that. They just don't like Catholics. For them, Catholics are people who try to blow up the Parliament and the king every once in a while. And so they refuse to grant further toleration for dissenters, for people who are not Anglican. Once again, it's weird because who's the head of the Anglican Church? Charles the Closet Catholic, right? So, anyway, so it's a fight that they have going back and forth. Charles II signs a treaty of friendship and alliance called the Treaty of Dover with Louis XIV's France. The two of them, France and England, decide that together they're going to beat up on the Dutch. But there's a secret part to the treaty. And the secret part of the treaty is that Louis XIV is going to give money to Charles II. Secret funds, like a secret slush fund for the king. He can do whatever he wants with it. In return, because there's got to be a, quid pro quo kind of thing. In return, Charles agrees that he's going to ease up on Catholics. And eventually, when it's safe to do so, he's going to come out of his Catholic closet and announce to the people of England that he is Catholic and would love them to be Catholic too. Louis XIV is a big Catholic. He wants everybody to be Catholic, and so that's the deal. The money exchanges hands, and basically, you can imagine that never does Charles II, well, that's not completely true. On his deathbed, as Charles II lies dying in his deathbed, he calls for a Catholic priest to give him last rites. And then he passes away. Now, part of the reason why he was pushing for toleration too is that his brother, guess what his brother's name is? You can see it there. James II, who takes over for him since he has no legitimate heirs, just illegitimate ones. James II takes over, and James is out of the closet Catholic. He's a Catholic guy. He's married a younger woman, a woman from a Catholic country, and Parliament says, James II, an old guy, he's going to die soon. We know he's Catholic. We're not going to worry too much about it. But James is really annoying to Parliament. He's, as an open Catholic himself, he's promoting Catholics in government, putting them in charge of the Navy, putting them in charge of universities, putting them in charge of important positions. That annoys the heck out of the Anglican Parliament. They don't like that. They're warring over, him being able to do that, and so on and so forth. Well, the straw that broke the camel's back was they were just going to wait out James. They were just going to wait for him to die, and then a safe Protestant monarch can take his place. Well, James procreates with his younger wife. They have a baby. The baby comes out, and the first thing the baby says, right at birth, says, "I'm Catholic." And everybody's like, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to have a bunch of Catholic monarchs. And so they decide to have a revolution. They decide to have a glorious revolution. And that's what happens next. Parliament invites James's daughter, Mary, and her husband, William of Orange, to invade England, to save them from a line of Catholic monarchs. The people of the Netherlands, what religion are they generally? 2/3 of them? They're Calvinists. And so William of Orange and his wife, Mary, James's daughter, invade England for liberty's sake, to prevent a line of Catholic absolutist rulers in the Stuart family.
James is the first daughter.
This should be, I think, James II's daughter, actually. She's going against her own father.
Okay.
You might think that's bizarre, but I think when she's about 15, he marries her off to William of Orange, who's considerably older than her and really quite ugly. So it's kind of a revenge there for that. So they do that. Imagine a Dutch army shows up on English soil, and James says, "People of England, let's defeat these invaders." And there's just crickets. Nobody defends James. James has to flee. He flees to France. Louis XIV gives him some money. He invades Ireland, hoping that the Irish, guess what religion the Irish are, for the most part? Catholic, will rise up and support him. He can get his throne back. It doesn't happen. William of Orange brings his army over to Ireland and smashes the Catholic army of James. What they established then is a constitutional monarchy without a constitution. In other words, a sharing of power. Imagine William of Orange and Mary are being invited by the Parliament. And it's kind of a similar deal. They say, well, we're going to invite you to come and topple James, and then we're going to rule together, okay? And they say, yeah, this time for real. Because, who is this guy? He's a Dutchman, for goodness sakes. He's in charge of the Netherlands. He doesn't really have a lot of standing in England. So that's what happens. A glorious revolution. Here's the constitutional bit of this. There's a Bill of Rights created. There is no actual constitution, but there's tradition, and then there's some extra stuff as well. So in 1689, right after that, they created this thing called the Bill of Rights. Wait, I've heard of a Bill of Rights before. Somewhere. Maybe it was in 9th grade. This Bill of Rights says, they kind of smooth over everything that needed to be worked out between the king and Parliament. It says that Parliament has to be called at least once every 3 years. Guess what? It gets called all the time. But it's supposed to be called, and it is called at least once every 3 years, and the king and Parliament agree to rule together. They're going to share power. Isn't that weird and different from what we see happening in other places? They say that there can be, officially, due to the Bill of Rights, there can be no army without Parliament's say-so. There can be no taxation without Parliament's say-so. Once there is an army, then the king's going to be running it, but, they're the ones who put it together. They're the ones who pony up the money for it as well. There was also a deal that monarchs could not interfere with parliamentary debate. They can't go into Parliament and give, members of Parliament the evil eye, or try to shut it down or interfere with it in any kind of way. And they guaranteed some civil rights as well. Things like no cruel or unusual punishments. I've heard of that somewhere too. Or trials by jury. Or the right to bear arms as long as you're not Catholic.
Is this only for white men?
Yes, it's definitely for property men. Although they're not going to torture women and children others either. They are going to put everybody on trial. But the right, I'm sure the right to bear arms is they're really only thinking about people, and at this point in time, people are men. So once again, isn't that kind of really different from what you see going on in Prussia or in Austria, the Habsburg lands, or or Peter the Great's Russia, or Louis XIV's reign. There were even some toleration acts, or a toleration act that is passed, which tolerates different kinds of Protestant dissenters. The word Puritan goes away, and then we start to see a number of different people who were initially called Puritans, who start to kind of develop different ideas, different beliefs. People like Baptists and Quakers and so on. So anybody who is Protestant is able to have their faith. They just don't have all of the same privileges or possibilities that Anglicans have. For example, if you want to go to the university, you have to be an Anglican. If you want to serve in government, you have to be an Anglican. Because it's the Church of England. It's the patriotic church. Why in the world wouldn't you want to belong to that patriotic church as a member of Parliament or a member of the government? And there were restrictions on Catholics. For example, Catholics not being able to serve in Parliament, or Catholics not being able to go to university, serve in government, and certainly not able to be a monarch. Never should a Catholic be the monarch. That's still in effect, I think. So, if Queen Elizabeth here in her elderly years decides to become Catholic, it's just not possible. She'd have to give that up. And that's really, it's really still kind of a subject in Britain. A number of Catholics move into England from Ireland, for example, over time, so they do have Catholics there. But a few years ago, they had a prime minister, Tony Blair. And Tony Blair's family, his wife and his kids were Catholic. They converted to Catholicism, to Catholic schools, and so on. And Tony Blair didn't become Catholic until he was done being prime minister. And then I think when he's done being prime minister, he becomes Catholic. It would be such a big deal to people that he avoided that. So, never a Catholic monarch. So, in the end, we have English sovereignty residing both in the Parliament and the King. You might remember we started this unit with, who does sovereignty lie with? Is it just the monarch, or is it some sort of privileged group? So in England, or Britain at this point in time, it is, with both. With a Parliament and a King. A kind of constitutional monarchy without a real monstrous piece of paper called the Constitution. And then England and Scotland became officially a united kingdom around 1707 or so, with the Scottish Parliament moving down to London and joining the English Parliament to become one parliament together. They allowed the Scots to have some trade benefits that went along with sort of sweetening the deal. Mary dies first. William of Orange is in power for a period of time, and then he passes away, and then their daughter Anne takes over. And she rules from about 1702 to 1714. She's really in charge during the War of Spanish Succession. And this poor lady has, I think, something like a dozen or 15 miscarriages. She's pregnant a dozen times easily and can never carry her heir to full term. And so she dies without an heir. And when she passes away, they are looking for, they don't want James III, by the way, who would still be around. They don't want that little kid who came out and said he was Catholic. Instead, they go to the closest relative who's Protestant and who's safe. It's a guy by the name of George. And he's from the Holy Roman Empire. He's from this place called Hanover in the Holy Roman Empire. And they ask him to come over from quote-unquote Germany and be the new English king, George I. There will be a George II. Get ready to boo. There's a George III. Boo. Now, come on now. and so on. So this is the end of, we've seen the Tudors go, we've seen the Stuarts go, and now we're in these Hanoverian kings. But we're more or less still with us. So that's the new dynasty. What questions do you have for me?
Why are we supposed to boo George III?
Oh, George III. He was the tyrannical king that we